Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer 7512-H-601 Louver door gravity pivot set in a hold open version in a bright black japanned. So let's go over what the part number means. 7512 stands for the fact that we're dealing with a double acting louver door gravity pivot set. These are all the parts and then a package of screws. The H part of the part number means that it's going to hold open in either direction. If this is closed, it'll hold open here and then it'll hold open back here. The 601 means bright black japanned, which is kind of somewhat synonymous with like an enamel paint. It has a semi-gloss to it. You wouldn't say glossy, although I think black japanned is considered glossy. Okay, so let's go over the specifications of this. First, before we get into the technical details of it, this is a double-acting pivot that gravity brings the door back to center. It is hold open at 90 degrees, as we said. It happens to be 90 degrees. It's non-handed. Maximum width is 30 inch. For doors 7/8 to 1 5/8 only. Maximum door weight is 50 pounds. Okay. There is a link below this video to the template and the instructions. And those two documents are extremely similar. The template has everything important dimensionally about all of the constituent parts, so I won't beleaguer all those points here. They're just on the template. And the template actually can be used as instructions, I suppose, for somebody that's done it before. But let's just refer to the instructions, because that's assuming this might be your first time installing this. Let's just go over the instructions. So doors, hardware like this is going to be used in a cafe door situation, kitchen to dining room. I've seen these installed in department stores, separating, public side to back of store side sorts of areas, and very common. So I've seen them in coffee shops, from the service area behind the cash wrap, the counter, to the public area. So you see them all over the place. Before I move on, available in a non-hold open, available for lighter doors, and available in multiple finishes. If you want to discuss any of those variations, please feel free to reach out to us. Now, if you're looking at the instructions, you'll see that the top left is called parts. Let's go over all the parts now. The top bracket is here. It's just an L bracket. A couple of countersinks to attach to the jamb, and then a hole for the top pivot, which gets attached to the top of the door. Typically surface mounted. You could mortise it if you wanted, but it's surface mounted. That rides like that. Okay. Before we go further, this document is included with the material, so you'll get this with it. Okay, now the bottom pivot assembly, you've got your bottom pivot here. We'll go over that more in a minute. Your cylinder and cam, and the cam is stuck down in there. A threaded bolt and a nut to hold it all onto the bottom bracket, okay, which is here. This, you can disassemble this. And during the process of installation, you will. Okay. It's got that star preparation and then a square drive at the bottom. Okay. That's important because, let's go over the hold open feature of this now. So this is the portion that goes inside of the cylinder tube, with the cam inside. That miter is cut there with the flattened off area. If this is the positive, the negative is inside of here. If this is the A, the B is inside of here. So if this is the orientation when the door is in the closed position, and you push the door either way to about 90 degrees, that flattened off area there will allow it to hold open until the door is pushed, and then gravity closes it. Okay? So getting that square drive into the star preparation in the bottom jam bracket is critical, because you need that, I'm assuming you want that door set at 0 degree, which is really easy to do. You know, it's made to go that way. So that would give you a 90-degree situation. Okay. Now I've installed these several times, and I've prepped doors for these innumerable times, it seems. So we've gone over all the parts. Let's go to step 1. Fasten bottom bracket to the jamb. Bottom bracket only can be installed up or down as shown. It is optional which way in which you're going to do it. Typically, I see it installed in the up orientation, but not exclusively. You can install it this way as well, should you want. Before you attach this to the jamb, calculate, okay, based on a reference to, well, you know what, that template is pretty important to know at this point. Calculate based on where the door is ultimately going to be, considering the fact that where you attach the jamb bracket, you've got to get the cylinder and cam assembly installed. Then your door is going to sit here. So keep in mind, the door is going to start here. So where you attach this, calculate, you know, this dimension so that you're satisfied with where it's all going to be. Moving to step 2. Moving back to step 2, get your jamb bracket applied, get your cylinder and cam assembly installed onto it. Now step 3 is the part that is sometimes the most interesting or challenging or impossible part of the process. Step 3, round jamb edge of door with 7/8 radius. Okay, so what they're saying is, based on the mathematics of where the door is going to be installed here onto this, if you have a square edge door, they want you to radius the edge of the door like this, okay? Because if this is the jamb and I have a square edge door here and that door goes to try to pivot, okay? If you don't radius the edge of the door, the outside corners of the door will bury or conflict with the jamb. That's why they want a radius on that. The radius is easily done if you've got the tools to do it. And the way that I've always done this, and I typically have always done 1 3/4 doors, so the you know, you'll have to determine the best way to go about doing this, but I would use a router with a large round over bit. So if you've got a 7/8 radius, you know, any radius smaller than that is not enough radius, is the bottom line. So the radius of 7/8 needs to be at least that. When I say that the radius can't be any greater than that, what I mean is you can have you can't have a radius that is 1 inch on the edge of the door, because the radius would not be small, you know, tight enough, so to speak, to take off enough of the door to be able to close correctly on the jamb. What I've done the way that I've gone about doing this is I would have a round over bit. I would have a round over bit with the proper diameter to give me the radius that I want, depending on what I was working with. Luckily, what I was saying before was I generally would do the majority of time 1 3/4 doors, or the majority of doors I've done were always 1 3/4, so the investment in the tooling was was obvious in order to do that if you're doing 1 3/4 doors all the time. So I would have myself a giant roundover bit. I don't remember the exact size. I don't remember. I'd have to walk out to the shop to check. And have a dedicated router set where I took the base of the router and cut a large hole into it to fit this giant bit into it. Okay, and I would have it set at the proper depth where the bearing, or the center line of where I needed to be on the edge of the bit, was exactly correct for an 1 3/4 door. Set the tool up so that I never had to change it, unless I had to sharpen the bit, is the bottom line. I would lay the door down on sawhorses. I'd clamp it down, and I would take my router bit and I would make one pass, and then I would make one more pass just to clean it up, because you're removing a lot of material at one time. And I found success in having at least a horsepower or a 1.5 horse router, nothing bigger, but enough power to do that in 2 passes, with the second pass being a cleaning pass. And when you take the router and you exit off the door at the end, don't push at all. You don't want to take any of the bottom of the door off. Just clean, come straight off that door like that. The door needs to be firmly clamped down, and the structure it's clamped to not move, because you're putting a lot of rotational force onto it with that router bit spinning very fast in a large router bit. One pass and a cleaning pass, turn the door over, do it to the other side, and that is just a great way to go, because it's clean, it's fast, it's easy. The problem is those bits are exceptionally expensive, is what you find, and a lot of people will go with much smaller bits to make the work happen, and that's acceptable too. It's your call on how you go about doing it. But in a shop setting, you would of course tend to follow the manufacturer's templating guidelines, so that when the client gets it, it's exactly the way the manufacturer intended for the material to be. So if you have any questions on how to create your radius, think of a bowl nose, like at the top row of tile in your bathroom, but double that, and then it becomes a radius. If you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you with it. So what they're saying is, you've got the bottom bracket installed, you've got the cylinder assembly bolted down to the bottom bracket. Step 3, put your radius. Okay, now what we're saying is attach to the door itself the bottom pivot. Okay, you'll want this portion, the mitered side, going towards the jamb. Okay, attach that to the bottom of the door, and that link to the template it provides a tremendous amount of valuable information. Looking at this, they've got switching over to the template. If you'll please open that up, they're showing a 1 1/16 of an inch from the edge of the door to the center line of the pivoting axis. Okay, and I have found that is accomplished by simply flushing the edge of the plate off to the edge of the door, and that gets you 1 1/16. So if this is the jamb, if you flush this to the edge of the door, you're all set. You don't have to worry about the math on that. Then do the same, still in step 3 on the instructions, do the same with the top pivot. This part goes up. Okay, flush that off to the edge, and your axis of pivoting will be, the math will work out. You're all set. You don't have to measure anything off, so that's nice. Step 4 now is attaching the top jamb bracket. And the only thing to keep in mind in that instance, and obviously now you're going to get the door in place, put the door in place, get the top jamb bracket set over the top pivot, and you'll mark your holes. But before you do that, just note, in step 4, they want 3/4 inch dimension from here to the bottom of here. So 3/4 inch from not the top of the door, but the top of the plate to the underside of the top jamb bracket. You know, I've never mortised these in my installations, but it would be very easy to do so. I can't make an argument for doing it either way. I would say surface mounting is probably the typical way to go. Whatever. If you wanted it to be mortised, you could easily do that with some Forstner bits. You know, 3 little holes, I suppose. You know, you'd be able to do that real quick and easy. I wouldn't see a real point in doing it, I suppose. Actually, I would see a point in not doing it, because then you're going to be cutting into the edge of the door, creating a point of failure if you mortise that. So, back to step 4. You keep that 3/4 inch dimension there, and the reason is 3/4 inch. That's how it's going to look when the door is in the closed position, because when that door gets pushed, it rises. Okay, and it rises to the tune of 3/4 inch, and that's why you leave that margin. At that point, the only option, the only other thing to consider really is you've got a frame jamb opening, you've got a net door width. Referring back to the template, you'll see that all of this math works out to a 5/32 clearance between the jamb and the hinge edge of the door, the pivot edge of the door, basically 1/8 of an inch. You'll need to be cognizant of the margin that you'll need on the opposite side based on the door thickness. Okay, you want to work that math out to determine how much smaller the door needs to be than the jamb opening, or how much bigger the jamb opening needs to be than the actual door width. Because you got 5/32 on the one side, and if your door is 1 3/8, you know, if you're going to radius one end, radius both ends, so that it looks really nice and you can get a tighter margin. Otherwise, you know, maybe 1/4 inch is something you should consider, but it depends on your door thickness. So lay that out to give you what you want. The on the template, the lower right-hand corner shows, and this is less common, where you mortise or notch out the entire bottom corner of the door so that this is all placed where you want it to be. That's a very uncommon installation, because stock louver doors typically do not have the proper construction to allow for you to cut that much of the door out. There might be dowels or, you know, joinery holding the stile and rail of the door together for all that. It's typically mounted like you see in the lower left-hand corner is how that's typically done. The there's a note there in step 4. To help with door alignment, shims may be used on bottom bracket to help rotate door in or out. So they're obviously talking about if your door is not in an absolute 0, if you've got a pair of doors, which would be more noticeable, you know, if it's not in a complete 0 degree at rest position, what they're saying is you could tip this in or out a little bit to play with that. You know, that's, you know, these are typically single doors, and there's so much margin all the way around, no one could notice if it's at 1 degree positive or negative. It just doesn't matter. You know, after that, there's really not much else to say about this installation. You know, typically the radius is the most challenging thing to come up with in terms of installation of this material. And if you can't achieve a radius at all and you're going to leave it square edge, you know, you're going to have to just cheat that margin out a little bit. You know, you'll have to let this pivot hang off into the opening a little bit more. You know, that screw is going to get dangerously close to where it needs to be, or you'll have to build this off the jamb a little bit. You know, I suppose you could do that as well. Radius is how these are done, and that's just the bottom line. If you're going to order doors from your mill, have the factory do it, so that it's completely perfect the way that you want it every single time. If you're going to radius both sides, figure 5/32, you know, on either side, 10/32. You know, 5/16 of an inch divided by 2. It's a small amount of material to take off of the door. It's no problem at all. If you have any questions on the Bommer 7512-H-601 double-acting gravity-style hold-open pivot set or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.